Okay, let's see if we can finish the first question before break. How would you describe the relationship between the speaker and his lover? Talking in bed. Talking in bed, this is today's most popular question, and most people think it's not a very good relationship. One group thought maybe they are no longer in love, but most people agree that they're still in love, they just are not as passionate as they used to be. So let's look at the evidence. Talking in bed ought to be easiest. It should be easiest, which means it is not easiest. Lying together there goes back so far. They have a long history of lying together. An emblem of two people being honest. This picture is a symbol of two people facing each other honestly. But more and more time passes silently. So if they're really being honest, then they sometimes feel like they don't have to talk. And it's okay not to talk. And so more and more time passes silently. We have 3 lines about the scenery outside, which shows that his focus is not on his lover. And he says that all of this environment, all of the world, none of this cares for us. So if we have problems, nobody will help us. It's our problem. It's our relationship. We have to deal with it. Nothing shows why at this unique distance from isolation. So they're not isolated, but they're also not isolated. It's a unique distance. It's a hard to describe distance from isolation. Right? They're not isolated, but they're not entirely isolated. It's somewhere in the middle. So at this unique distance, it becomes still more difficult to find words at once true and kind or not untrue and not unkind. So in their relationship at this moment, it's not easy or simple to say something that is true and kind. But if the speaker can't do that, then he thinks at least I can try not to be untrue and unkind. So if I can't be as passionate as I was before, at least I can try not to hurt you. This is a very interesting use of the double negative. In English, we usually say that the double negative is the same as a positive. But this tells us that's not true. There is a difference between true and not untrue. There's a difference between kind and not unkind. And this poem is a good example of that difference. So that's question 1. Question 2, is the ending of High Windows optimistic or pessimistic? Guys, we're going to end early today. So would you mind if we don't take a break? 今天会提早结束，所以中间不停不休息可以吗？ Yeah, okay, so number 2, High Windows. Is the ending optimistic or pessimistic? Most people think it's also a very popular question. Most groups think it is pessimistic, but one group thinks it is optimistic. So let's take a closer look. When I see a couple of kids and guess he's having sex with her and she's taking pills or wearing a diaphragm, I know this is paradise everyone old has dreamed of all their lives. This is one sentence. So he doesn't see them having sex. He guesses that we would say that they're dating, but he doesn't think of dating, right? He thinks of having sex. And he's also guessing that maybe the girl is taking pregnancy prevention pills or wearing a diaphragm to prevent pregnancy. In other words, that the guy is not always wearing a condom. And of course, the poet is a man. So he says that everyone old thinks that this is paradise. Of course, old means old men. That this is something that men dream of all their lives, that this is like the perfect situation. Bonds and gestures. Bond is like a manacle, 枷锁. And gestures pushed to one side like an outdated combine harvester, and everyone young going down the long slide to happiness endlessly. So in this situation, you don't have to worry about restrictions. You don't have to worry about things you have to do. Gesture is like some symbolic actions that you have to do. Uh, these are no longer needed, no longer necessary. So they're like an outdated combine harvester. Instead, everyone is just enjoying the situation of happiness endlessly, like going down a long slide. So easy, so fun. When he sees this, I wonder if anyone looked at me 40 years back. So when I was young and I was in this situation, did anyone older look at me and think that'll be the life? Which means, oh, that's great, that's paradise. If I could only have that. No God anymore, or sweating in the dark about hell and that, or having to hide what you think of the priest. So when he was younger, the society was more religious, more traditional. Remember, England has a national church, 英国国教, the Church of England. So when he was younger, it was a more religious society. And so he's wondering, when I was younger and having fun, were older people looking at me and thinking, they were jealous. Don't have to worry about religion, don't have to worry about going to hell, don't have to worry about being judged by the priest. And in fact, we have a contrast here. When he says worrying about hell, this is contrasted to the pill and the diaphragm, because traditional Christianity does not allow contraception, 避孕. So in fact, this is already a change in society. Continuing what he imagines somebody might be thinking. He and his lot will all go down the long slide like free bloody birds. So in other words, back then, was anybody thinking the same thing that I am thinking today? And here is where he shows his jealousy, right? Bloody is a swear word. In Chinese, we might say tamada. And bird is also slang, like a young person, young and carefree person. So when he, the speaker, thinks maybe when I was younger, somebody was also thinking this about me, then his perspective changes. And immediately, rather than words, comes the thought of high windows, the sun comprehending glass, and beyond it, the deep blue air that shows nothing and is nowhere and is endless. So in fact, the ending is an imagery of limitlessness. He's looking through, you can imagine like a camera, right? Going through the high window, going through the glass and seeing only the huge, empty, deep blue sky. There is no boundary, there is no limit. And that kind of symbolizes his new attitude, new emotion. So if at the beginning he sees these two kids and he thinks, oh, they're having a great time, I wish I still had that. That's kind of like a restriction, right? He's saying, I don't have that. I'm not in paradise. But by the end, he doesn't feel that restriction anymore because he remembers, I used to have that. So is it optimistic or pessimistic? Most people in class today think it's pessimistic because the conclusion is that he is no longer young. And that is true. He does have that original thought at the beginning of the poem. That thought is still there. That jealousy is still there. But the people who think it is optimistic say that he is no longer tormented by that thought. He has the thought, but it doesn't make him suffer anymore. He kind of accepts it. And then the people who say the ending is pessimistic will say, oh, that's just cold comfort. It doesn't really help. He's just like comforting himself. So, the point of talking about this is not to decide one or the other. The point is to be able to see both sides. And in fact, to see how the optimism and the pessimism are two sides of the same coin. They go together. Question 3. Nobody took this question, so let's look at homage to a government. Next year we are to bring the soldiers home for lack of money. So the first line seems great, right? Oh, our soldiers are finally coming home. Like we won or something. But the second line says it's only because we don't have enough money. And it is all right. Places they guarded or kept orderly must guard themselves and keep themselves orderly. We want the money for ourselves at home instead of working. And this is all right. So he's basically saying the reason we don't have enough money to pay our soldiers is because more people at home want social welfare instead of going to work. But this is all right. It's hard to say who wanted it to happen, but now it's been decided. Now that it has been decided, nobody minds. The places are a long way off, not here, which is all right. And from what we hear, the soldiers there only made trouble happen. So nobody knows who came up with this idea, but everyone agrees, this is a pretty good idea. Those places our soldiers were at, but those were far away. We don't really care about them too much. And in fact, our soldiers only caused problems over there. So if they come back, next year we shall be easier in our minds. We will feel more comfortable about our actions as a country. Next year we shall be living in a country that brought its soldiers home for lack of money. This looks like it's repeating the first stanza, but there's actually a new idea here. Yes, the soldiers are coming home because they don't have enough money. But here it's saying this is the kind of country that we are. The only reason they're coming home is because we don't have enough money, and we don't have enough money to pay our soldiers. This is the kind of country we are. The statues will be standing in the same tree-muffled squares and look nearly the same. So here it's talking about the statues that you can see all around England. Especially in Western countries, they like to put up statues to commemorate important historical people. And if you go to London, a lot of those statues are about colonial heroes or like winning battles against some country across the world. So even when our soldiers come home, those statues will still be there and be the same. Our children will not know it's a different country. All we can hope to leave them now is money. So the line 17 is kind of repeating the idea that this is the kind of country that we are now. But what kind of country is this? The last line. We care more about money than other values. We're not bringing our soldiers home because they're dying. We're not bringing them home because we're against colonialism. We're bringing them home because we want more money for ourselves. So if this is what we care about, then this is the only thing we can leave to our children. So the question, what is the attitude to colonialism? Well, this is quite complex. On the one hand, he doesn't think it's a good idea, right? He says the soldiers there only made trouble happen from what we hear. So like people say that colonialism is a bad idea. And so next year we shall be easier in our minds. So he doesn't have a strong feeling about this, but he kind of agrees. Maybe colonialism is not a good idea. At the same time, there seems to be a comparison between foreign adventurism and having more money at home. Like, sure, colonialism is probably not a good thing, according to the speaker, but at least it's something, right? At least in the 19th century, we believed that we could help other countries, that we could help them improve. At least we believed that sending our soldiers there has some kind of meaning. But today, we don't believe anything. We only want more money, is what the poem is saying. So it's very complicated. It's kind of like saying, uh, even if you make mistakes, it's better than doing nothing. Or even if you believe the wrong thing, it's better than not believing anything. So, it's a very nuanced, sophisticated, not sophisticated, but like a very nuanced way of thinking about what a country does when it is pursuing colonialism. Of course, I think the best answer for the speaker is if his country can find something else that is also meaningful and is less harmful than colonialism. Number 4, the speaker of Aubade says, death is no different whined at than withstood. So it doesn't matter if you complain, doesn't matter if you are brave, death comes for all of us. Does the entire poem agree? One group took this question and they said, yes, the entire poem is saying the same thing. So let's take a look. First of all, the title, Aubade. An aubade is a kind of music or poem announcing the dawn. So like if you read a play or if you watch like an opera or a musical or like a Disney movie, sometimes something will happen in the night and just before dawn, they will start singing a song. That kind of song is called an aubade. 黎明歌, right? Like think about Les Miserables, 悲惨世界. Right? The revolution happens, and then there's like the next day will be completely different. That's also a kind of aubade. So what is this speaker thinking about at night before dawn? I work all day and get half drunk at night. Waking at 4 to soundless dark, I stare. In time, the curtain edges will grow light. So like he's waiting for the light to come. Till then, so before then, I see what's really always there. Unresting death. So death does not rest. Death always keeps moving, always takes the next victim. Death, a whole day nearer now, making all thought impossible, but means except for, but how and where and when I shall myself die. Arid interrogation. Arid means land that cannot grow plants. So this interrogation is fruitless. It's useless to ask these questions. Yet the dread of dying and being dead flashes afresh to hold and horrify. So he cannot escape these thoughts about death. The mind blanks at the glare. It's the idea of death is so bright that it makes my mind go blank. Not in remorse, the good not done, the love not given, time torn off unused. Nor wretchedly because an only life can take so long to climb clear of its wrong beginnings, and may never. So he's saying it's hard to think about death, but not because of these two common ideas. The first common idea, there's so much I haven't done. The second common idea, there's so much I can still improve and change. So it's not because of these ideas. Instead, line 16, but at the total emptiness of the total emptiness forever, the sure extinction that we travel to and shall be lost in always. So what really scares him about death is that it is forever. There is no end to death. Once you're dead, that's it. Not to be here, not to be anywhere, and soon. Nothing more terrible, nothing more true. So this is the most terrible part of death. And it's coming soon, only in a few dozen years, and death will come. This is a special way of being afraid that no trick dispels. So this kind of fear is hard to escape. There's no trick to getting over this kind of fear. Religion used to try. That vast moth-eaten musical brocade created to pretend we never die. So he's saying one big part of religion is to comfort us and assuage us that no, we're not going to die. We're just going to go to heaven. And he calls it a musical brocade because the Christianity uses a lot of music to evoke that kind of idea. So to him, it's just a musical performance. In addition to religion, line 25, and specious stuff, so useless stuff that says, no rational being can fear a thing it will not feel. This is something that people say to try to escape the fear of death. Dying is not, it's just the end of life. You cannot feel what you do not have. Once you're dead, you can't feel it, so you don't have to be afraid. But he says that this is specious because he's not afraid of pain. He's afraid of nothingness. Right? Not seeing that this is what we fear. This is exactly why I'm afraid. No sight, no sound, no touch or taste or smell, nothing to think with, nothing to love or link with. Link here is like build a human connection. The anesthetic from which none come round. Anesthetic is what the hospital gives you before surgery, 麻醉药. So this is the anesthetic that doesn't end. And so it stays just on the edge of vision, a small unfocused blur, a standing chill that slows each impulse down to indecision. So even when you don't think about it, the idea is always there. And it makes you hesitate for each decision. Most things may never happen. This one will. And realization of it rages out in furnace fear when we are caught without people or drink. So when, according to the poem, when you're not spending time with people and when you're not drunk and you suddenly realize you're going to die and you're going to face endless nothing, suddenly fear burns inside you with anger. You're angry because you're so scared. Courage is no good. It means not scaring others. Being brave lets no one off the grave. This is a good pun. The original sentence is, it lets no one off the hook, which means that to let someone off the hook means to let somebody escape. So the idea is, even if you're brave, you're still gonna die. Death is no different whine that than withstood. So yeah, it looks like up to now, the poem agrees with this sentence. It's useless to be brave because you're gonna die anyway. Last stanza. Slowly light strengthens. Remember, this is all happening before dawn. He's thinking about all of this before daytime. Slowly light strengthens and the room takes shape. So he sees the room again because the light is here. It stands plain as a wardrobe, what we know, have always known, know that we can't escape, yet can't accept. This fact is as simple and plain as a piece of furniture, but it's still so hard to accept. One side will have to go, right? It says we can't escape and we can't accept. One of these has to go. You either have to escape it or to accept it. Otherwise, it's a contradiction, 矛盾. Meanwhile, telephones crouch, getting ready to ring in locked up offices. Crouch. Okay, so the film 卧虎藏龙 is translated as Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. So that's what crouch means. They're preparing to jump. So telephones are preparing to ring. And all the uncaring, intricate, rented world begins to rouse. Okay, so the world is uncaring. The world is intricate. but it's also a rented world. It's not forever. You're only here for a short time. It's like a rental. To rouse means to wake up. The sky is white as clay with no sun. Work has to be done. Postmen, like doctors, go from house to house. Oh, I love that image, that last line. Postmen go from house to house. That's their job, right? They maintain connection between people. But doctors go from house to house, which means that people are always dying. They're always calling their doctors. So like dying is as everyday, as normal as getting the mail. So does the poem itself agree with the idea that death is the same whether you complain or whether you're brave? I think yes, it does agree. And yet, just like that group said, the group that took this question, by facing this fact, the poem itself is really a very brave poem. To be able to say that dying is as everyday as getting the mail itself is a very brave thing to say. So even though it's saying being brave is useless, it is still being brave anyway. This is, I think, a very important thing to realize about life, which is we often do things because we try to find some meaning for them. You're listening to me talk because you want to get a better grade, you want to graduate, you want to have a good job, make money, have a good life. But if everything ends in death anyway, then what does it matter how good your life is? If you have a full and loving family, you're going to lose everything anyway. If you have $1 trillion, you're not going to be able to take that after death. So what's the meaning? What's the use? That's exactly what this poem is saying. It's useless, meaningless. We're all going to die anyway. And yet, after the day breaks, people still go to work. Postmen still deliver the mail, and doctors still try to take care of people and to comfort the dying. Even when you can't find the meaning itself is in the action. We're not doing things for a reason. We're doing things because doing things itself is the reason. How should I say that in Chinese? 我们做事情不是为了什么意义，做事情本身就有意义。Something like that. So, like, you know, we're all gonna die. Whatever you look for, whatever you're searching for, you're going to lose. So the only thing that has meaning is what you are always doing, regardless of whatever you're chasing, right? The doing itself is the meaning. Question 5, is this poetry worth teaching in school? One group took this question and they said yes. Even when the poem is talking about sex or the psychological impact of not having sex for 40 years, or whether it's talking about death, this group said these ideas are important enough to discuss in school, but maybe not to young students. Like if you talk about these poems to like junior high students, they're not going to know what you're talking about. And they might misunderstand some of the ideas. They might, you know, laugh at the F word or like the idea of diaphragm or whatever. But the ideas themselves, according to this group, are worth talking about. Especially another group said that Larkin uses simple language to express these deep ideas. And that also might help with classroom discussion, as you guys just discovered. So we can look at the fifth poem we have not yet discussed as an example of this. Sad steps. Groping back to bed after a piss, so after going to the bathroom, I part thick curtains, and I'm startled by the rapid clouds, the moon's cleanliness. 4 o'clock. So he looks through the window and the scenery surprises him. The clouds are moving fast. The moon is bright and clean. It's 4 in the morning. Wedge-shadowed gardens lie under a wind-picked sky. So the wind is strong, right? The clouds are moving fast. There's something laughable about this, 可笑. The way the moon dashes through clouds that blow loosely as cannon smoke to stand apart. Stone-colored light sharpening the roofs below. High and preposterous and separate. So it's describing the moon. It's high in the sky. It's so ridiculous. It's just a shining white light in the middle of the sky. How ridiculous is that? And it's separate. The clouds are moving past, the wind is blowing, but the moon is standing still. Lozenge of love, medallion of art. Oh, wolves of memory, immensement. So now he's talking about the cultural meanings of the moon, right? The moon is used in love poetry. It's used in art. It's connected to like the wolves at night howling at the moon. Such great big ideas. No. One shivers slightly looking up there. So like 就有一点颤抖. The hardness and the brightness and the plain, far-reaching singleness of that wide stare. It's the one moon. It's the one source of light. It's the single thing. So this moon, the brightness, the plainness, the unique moon, is a reminder of the strength and pain of being young. That it can't come again, but is for others undiminished somewhere. So the poem ends with a very interesting symbol. The moon symbolizes youth because it is hard and bright and plain and unique, just like being young. So that even if you cannot regain your own youth, but you know that it is still shining on somebody elsewhere. Just like the moon is always shining on other people also. And he calls this poem Sad Steps. Very interesting. And apparently, according to the footnote, it's a reference to a Sydney poem, Astrophil and Stella. You guys remember this? This was week 2, I think. With how sad steps, O moon, thou climbest the skies. We didn't read this poem. But this is connected to like love and art, using the moon for love and art, right? The title itself is taken from a love poem. This line is like, when the moon rises in the sky, it is full of sadness. So the whole poem it's thinking about the moon and how like the different feelings that the moon gives the speaker. And it ends with a reflection on lost youth. Like if you think about trying to teach this poem to a junior high student, they're not gonna really understand. Like even teaching this to you guys, sophomores, it might take some thinking to really understand what it's talking about. I often think that Oscar Wilde once said, 王尔德曾说, youth is wasted on the young. Was it Wilde or Churchill? Somebody famous. The idea that there's so many things that you see and feel and are taught when you're young that you only understand when you're older. And I think literature is one of these things. For many works of really powerful literature, it's about life experiences that you only will have when you are a bit older, when you really leave school, enter society, have to face the world, have to find your own people. That's really when a lot of this literature starts to make sense. English teachers like me like to share stories about how, oh, a former student came and said, oh, teacher, you know, when you were teaching me this when I was 18, I had no idea what you were talking about. But now that I'm 40, I really thank you for teaching me. Yeah, so I often think about this. Is it really meaningful to teach you guys this classic literature? And my tentative answer is that two parts, right? One, hopefully you will remember these ideas in some way when you need them. But the second idea is hopefully it can prepare you for these things when they happen to you. We will face death, either our own or other people's or our pets. Right? We will either fall in love or have somebody fall in love with us, or we will have friends we lose to their partners. Love will impact our life in some way. We will have to struggle with prejudice and bias, especially your English major. So you will probably interact with foreigners who have a very different value system. And hopefully reading about it in this class can help prepare you for those situations in the future. That's my comfort. Question 6. How can you tell that this was written in the 20th century? Nobody took this question, so one last time, let's practice the final exam question. Of course, we have the idea of post-colonial literature. Homage to a government touches on what the soldiers are doing in a foreign country, whether it's a good idea or not. The talk about like sexual freedom in current society versus 40 years ago points to the effects of the counterculture. The counterculture is not just about like social protest and using drugs. It's also about sexual liberation, more rights and freedoms for women and gay people and people from different backgrounds and genders and cultures. So the comparison in High Windows is a result of that counterculture. The difference only exists because of the counterculture. I think that's about it. I chose Larkin for the last week, not because it's, you know, it fits the 20th century, but because it's kind of fun. Okay, so do you have questions about today's discussion? All right, final exam. So the rules are the same, almost the same. There's one change. The rules are almost the same as the midterm, but many of you did not follow the rules. So I want to remind you of the rules that many people did not follow. Okay, so for example, your essay must have multiple paragraphs. The paragraphs cannot be numbered. And the new rule is you also cannot itemize your points. So let me explain this in Chinese. 你的答案必须要超过一个段落，不能上编号。新的规定是不能分项列举。分项列举的意思是说，一个标题冒号开始讲，然后第二个标题冒号开始讲。Right? So do not use like a title colon explanation, title colon explanation. I want to read an essay. 请以文章的形式来作答。Do not itemize. 不要分项列举。This also includes evidence and then explaining the evidence. And then the next paragraph, evidence and then explaining the evidence. That is also itemizing. 如果你的文章每一段开头是先讲证据，然后解释证据，先讲证据再解释证据， 然后段落跟段落之间没有连起来的话，这个也是分项列举。Right，请写一篇文章。If you're not sure how to do that, there are example answers here. Right, so for example, that's kind of small. Here, so first this person begins with the idea, then gives the evidence, then gives the location for the evidence, and then explains this evidence. Then the next point also first gives evidence, location, describes this evidence and explains it. Right, so the evidence and the location are part of the answer. They are integrated into the answer. 融在答案里面，融入答案。Right, and then the next paragraph. This is a really long answer, sorry. But you can see the way that it's written. It's not like point, right? It's a complete paragraph, it's a complete essay. And you can look at the other example answers as well for different ways to answer the questions. Okay. You cannot talk to other people, right? You can use any resource except other people. 不能跟别人讨论. Somebody did this for the midterm. 你只能跟我讨论，不能跟别人讨论. Your evidence must come right next to, the location of the evidence must come right next to the evidence. As we just saw, right? 你不能把证据全部写在最后面，你要把那个证据位置写在证据隔壁. And the evidence must come from 4 different points in the text, not just 4 examples. If your 4 examples are all from the same paragraph, that is 1 example. I want examples from 4 different places. Or lines, paragraphs or lines. 其实也不用卖关子，等一下给你们看啦。Okay, and then, I designed this exam so that you can do it successfully without looking at other information. But if you want to look at other information and you want to include it in your answer, please also give me the specific evidence and location right next to your evidence. I'll say that in Chinese. 我设计这考试，其实你即使只看笔记跟讲义跟课堂影片也可以作答。但是如果你想要去找外援资料的话，请你把所找到的详细资料放在你引用的证据隔壁，不要丢到最后面。然后你不要说哦，以上都是参考某某网站，这样的话你通篇就不是你的话了吗？Yeah, I think that's about it. Those are the rules that most people broke. Oh, and one last rule, which we will see in the exam itself. Let's see, here we go. Read the Nadine Gordimer story, The Moment Before the Gun Went Off, on the main Moodle page. Here's the rule. Aside from the author and year of publication, your answer cannot use anything about the author's life or work or thinking, and it cannot say anything about the year that the story was published. 不能用作者生平或思想做证据，不能以出版年份做证据。I did not cut out the author introduction part. If you want to read it, it can help you understand, but you cannot put it into your answer. 等一下档案也许会看到一些作者生平的部分，但是那个只是给你参考，你不能放到答案里面。It was written in the 20th century. And when you explain the 20th century, you must use the handout. 20世纪这个时期必须是以讲义上所定义为主。If you find information about the 20th century literature online, it has to match the handout. 所以文学时期的资讯，你即使上网找到了，如果跟讲义讲的不一样，也不算，要根据讲义所讲的。 And finally, your answer must mention the 20th century. 虽然我已经告诉你这个时期了，但是你作答的时候还是要提到这个时期的名称。你还是要讲说，the story was written in the 20th century, and I can tell because blah blah blah。要提到这个时期，这样才算是一个完整的答案。Okay, and then some hints 提示。You can consider the story's characters, perspective, setting, themes, language, and historical background. 可以考虑故事里面出现的人物、观点、设定、主题、语言和故事的历史背景。所以不是作品的历史背景、出版背景，是故事里面的历史背景。Questions? Okay, let's take a look at the story. 等我一下。So 1 page, 2 pages, 3 pages, 4 pages, 4 pages. Not even 4 full pages. It's like 3.5 pages. It's not too long. Okay, so that is the final exam. It will begin after class ends today, and you have up until next Friday midnight. 到下礼拜五半夜截止。Questions? Great, good luck. Next week, we're going to watch a movie. Right.